Marco, welcome to the Democratizing SEO podcast. How are you doing today?
Very well. Thank you, Austin. What about you?
Yes, very well, thanks. Very, very well. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I came across you via recommendation, and I thought you'd be a very poignant person to speak with about data and SEO processes using data. As I like to do with all my SEO guests before we get into onto the main topic, I like to ask my SEO guests how they became an SEO in the first place. So with that said, how did you become an SEO professional?
So I started in December 2017 randomly because I was helping a friend with his blog. It was a publisher website, a gaming publisher website. And I started using Yoast after 1 or 2 days. And then from there, I just Googled all the stuff and practiced. So it's very simple, actually. I just started randomly because I just discovered there were SEO and I was like, it looks interesting. Yeah.
So what is it about SEO that caught your attention?
I would say, strategy for sure.
Okay.
And mostly when it interacts with content. Because technical SEO, I don't like it very much, actually. Backlinks, I mean, yes, but not as much as content. So mostly the focus of content strategy, how to handle all the processes behind SEO, and so on.
And I see from your LinkedIn profile that you're very much a data-led person. Would you say this is okay? So what is it about data? Because I find that SEOs are quite, especially those who are very much content driven. They tend to be creative and less data focused. Whereas you're very much a data focused person, and you're also keen on content. So, what is it about data that interests you?
So mostly the thing about data is that it's powerful if you know what to ask. So if you ask questions and you know how to use it. For example, a lot of people actually make estimates in SEO, like when they have to pitch or something like that. And knowing how to use data allow you to be more credible, to make something more grounded. It helps you with estimates. It helps you to show what happened and to simplify some processes like content audits or traffic drops, because, you have more experience, you know where to look and what to do in those cases. So that's pretty much why I like it. And this doesn't replace content driven or doing content, because of course they are different things, but you can do both at the same time. They're just different stages.
How do you find SEO in-house?
Honestly, I'm not a big fan because the problem, because the thing is that it's mostly management. It's not really SEO. It's mostly doing sales or management because you have to convince other people to give you budget. But that's pretty much for any in-house role, pretty much, compared to other, SEO roles. But the advantage is that you can actually, be more hybrid on some regards, because you have more room to test things compared to an agency. Because in agencies, it's a fact. They usually work way more, or they work on marketing and other stuff. But if you want to skew a little bit, it's, in my opinion, harder. But if I have to pick the definitive one, I would say the best one is always consultant or entrepreneur. So owning websites. In my opinion, that's the best one can do.
Interesting. Do you think data is a fourth pillar of SEO, or do you think it's within the three different pillars? I ask this because most of the SEOs that I've spoken with, they are one or the other. So they either stick with SEO being the typical three pillars: on page, off page, technical. But SEOs who are data driven, would argue that data is the fourth pillar of SEO. What's your opinion on it?
I think this is the question they've ever asked me in general, like as a whole. My opinion, no, it's not really my opinion. It's mostly a fact. When we talk about data and SEO, it's not like it's not part of SEO. So it doesn't sit with SEO. SEO is simply an industry. Like if you are an analyst in the field of finance or healthcare, simply put, your data are either financial or medical or whatever. So it's a vertical. SEO in this case would be a vertical, okay? It's an industry. Mm-hmm. I don't consider data as a pillar. I do the opposite. Of course, in SEO, you can have different verticals. You can have SEO for travel, SEO for food, for fashion, for finance, whatever. But at the end, SEO is simply a domain of application, like finance, healthcare, supply chain, or any other industry, manufacturing, simply put. But I would say, to answer your question more precisely, that it would be a fourth pillar because it's not technical SEO at all, because I am decent at technical SEO, and they are totally unrelated because they are totally different fields. So I would never put it inside tech, even though you see it, because it's easier to sell it if you say technical SEO, because it sounds more authoritative, right? Because it sounds more objective. But in practice, it is not. So I would say it's a fourth pillar, or even better, it's not even part. They are different disciplines, like content marketing, but they happen to overlap.
Mm. Okay, so walk me through generally how you use data then. Do you look at it from across the different pillars? Like, what is your overall approach to the way you use data?
So I only do content SEO, so you can call it on page in practice, because technical, of course, I know technical and off page, of course, but not at advanced level. It's mostly to avoid disasters. For example, I don't need to use data to tell someone that a certain backlinking campaign could be dangerous if not executed properly. I know this. I know where to put backlinks. I know how to I know. I also know the basic stuff of tech SEO, as well as hreflang and some more advanced topics. But I'm not an expert in rendering or other stuff. So I mostly use data for content and for strategy, which is not really SEO if you think about it, because content management or managing your operations is not part of SEO. It's content marketing or something like that, if you want to put a label. So most of what I do is a strategy and planning of content, as well as updating and pruning content. Everything about content and strategy can be found in data if you use Search Console, Analytics, crawl, so Screaming Frog, whatever, crawl data, and private, first party, or content plans. So these other type of data, I usually use them to tell them, look, these pages are getting worse. This is where you have to put more focus for this reason. This is where, you should do this, and so on. So it's mostly on content and strategy.
Okay, so let's say you have a look at analytics as well as Search Console, and you notice a set of pages, let's say 5 of them, use the same template, have dipped in traffic. How do you determine the cause of it? Assuming you're just looking at it from a content point of view, how do you rule out it's a technical problem?
You don't. I will explain you why. So not really. Analytics, if you consider the traditional definition, the traditional role of an analyst is not really interested with cause effect. Doesn't bother with why. Bothers with what and how. So I can tell you what happened, maybe how it happened, but the reason we don't really care in SEO, because it's also hard to determine if I have to make something scientific or very precise. So if you have a page with a certain template, I don't need to do any data analysis. I just check the technical side of things and see if something is broken and define the reason why. So you don't need analytics for that. In this case, it's much easier. It's SEO. You just see and see why. Probably, I don't know, it can be rendering, it can be whatever problem. But this could be one reason. If you notice there is no technical reason, probably it's related to the quality or to the authority of your content. But again, I'm just stating hypothesis. That's how I do. Because in reality, if you want to prove something, like actual proving it, it's not easy. Because you need to first do inference and also do experimentation to prove that that relationship is not causal. There is no cause effect, or there is, which is not that easy. That's why I avoid it. Because usually you don't care. Even if you tell a client, they want the problem solved. They don't really care about the why. Also, anyway, if I tell you 10 pages are declining, usually they will ask you, fix them, not why. I mean, they can also ask you why, but the end goal is fixing them. And I don't think that even if you know the why, sometimes you can't just prevent it. If they have one Google update per month, it's unfeasible.
SEO reporting, of course, crosses paths with analytics as a department or a team, right? Do you think SEO reporting is best carried out by SEOs, or should that be left to the analytics team?
No, I think SEOs. Because you need domain expertise, you need domain knowledge. In my life, I've talked to a lot of data scientists, and not even analysts, scientists, and they were terrible because they didn't know SEO. Of course, if you don't know an industry, you can't analyze data or give insights or anything because you have no clue how it works. Because if I were a data professional without SEO knowledge, the first thing I would analyze is the technical stuff. Because I've seen it. They would measure stuff like DOM sites, title length, and this stuff. But we know as SEOs that this stuff is pointless. Like, why would you even measure the length of a meta description or something to prove? You wouldn't. But if you don't know SEO, it's reasonable. If you think like a non-SEO, this would be the first thing you would do. Screaming Frog,
right, yeah,
for a data professional, looks like something more reliable or useful compared to Search Console. Because, it's technical data, it's more grounded. But in reality, it's not. So I would say SEOs, naturally, and usually analysts don't really do SEO or that stuff. They work in other industries. So usually it's SEO that know other stuff, not vice versa. There are some minorities, there are some exceptions, but usually, in all honesty, if you are an analyst, the salary is much lower or it's harder to enter SEO. Like, why should you even bother to do the other way around? Just do finance, business, or even marketing. It's more challenging, but usually it's SEOs that do analytics because it's more profitable for them. But the other way around, so if you go from the other route, I wouldn't say it's more convenient.
You mentioned data science a moment there. What does SEO have to do with data science and vice versa? Or is there no relation?
Now, of course, data science encompasses everything where you have data, like every industry. And SEO happens to be one of them. The thing is that now you have access to better tools because in the last few years there has been higher interest, right? So it's easier to work with data. And in SEO, we actually have a good chunk of data. Search Console, analytics, log files, crawl data.
Yeah.
And all of them can be analyzed if you have the right tools and the right amount of knowledge. So data science happen to be quite helpful. But for the viewers or listeners, if you prefer, the difference is that data science would be the umbrella term for including as well analytics. It's mostly marketing labels because the border between most terms is confusing, because there may be different definitions. Yeah. So it's confusing, but we can say is the science, the discipline of working with data, if you have to be more correct or generic. So it does involve SEO. And some of it you already know, because now you have, for instance, the integration with BigQuery, the one-button integration in Google Search Console, and other stuff that is supposed to boost businesses, to encourage businesses to use their data. So this is something where you need data science, because then you need to analyze and process this data somehow.
Is more data better, in your opinion?
No, I think it's mostly quality, because many people complain, many SEOs complain about the sampling in Search Console and analytics.
Yeah,
I think it's fair if you have to do keyword research, because if you remove keywords, right, I have less data. So this is a loss, I agree. But if you have to do inference, so if you have to generalize something to say, is this good or bad? Or if you have to make decisions, you don't care. You don't need all the data. So more data is not actually better, even in other industries. If you do a survey, right, they will never interview the whole population because it's too expensive, and the results wouldn't change after a certain threshold, okay? You just need a representative sample. So the same is in SEO. If you have to do research, of course you want as much, so the more the better. For research, for keyword research, or for the details. But for all the other stuff, like decision making, judging the success of something, you don't really need all the data or more data. You need the right amount with a good quality.
The right amount, how would you then define it? Both the right amount and good quality.
And quality. Okay. Good quality means like reliable data you can trust, or that is realistic. No, not really accurate, but realistic. For instance, Search Console data is more realistic than SEMrush and Ahrefs. Okay, so it's already quality. Mm-hmm. For the right amount, the right amount in our specific case would be data from the API, not from the interface. Usually that much is fine, because I told you, many people obsess over these details, but in practice no one cares, because when you have to execute an SEO plan, I can tell you, I have 50,000 content ideas. Okay, who will ever implement them?
Exactly.
So this is the point. In practice, you need much less. You have a large scope, you have something big, and then you have to simplify it to create something small and digestible, something easier. So it's the same with data. So the right amount would be that amount that allows you to ask the right questions. Like if you use interface data, which is the data you find in Google Search Console by clicking export, it's not enough. It's not the right amount. But if you use the API and you pull as much as you can, for many use cases it's enough. You don't need to stress too much over it.
Mm-hmm. Many years ago, not many, some years ago, there was this talk, or should I say rhetoric, around quote unquote big data. We hear less of it now. Big data. So it's like big data.
No, before, the name of the tool.
Oh, I haven't mentioned the tool. I just stated big data.
Okay.
So there was this rhetoric around big data, right? So big data was a thing. It was like a marketing uprise, if you like.
Yeah.
How would you define big data?
Okay, so as you said, it's a marketing stunt. It was a marketing stunt, basically. It was propaganda, essentially. You define big data usually with the definition of the 5 V's that I don't recall right now, because it's college stuff, it's theory. It was essentially velocity and something like that. So volume, it means that usually you have big data when this quantity increases over time. And at a certain speed, like of data ingestion, something like that. I'm not an expert in big data, but for SEO, you don't have big data. Unless you have to analyze the New York Times or something like that with other sources, then it's big data. But in most cases, in SEO, we don't do big data. It's overrated. But also in other industries. I was reading an article, if I recall, from a Microsoft engineer that back then was one of the, of these guys that promoted big data. And in this article, if I recall, it was called "What the Duck is Big Data," something like that. He was saying that it was false at the end because many companies will never reach that amount of data because 1 terabyte is not that much. If you think about a corporation, it's not much. If you think about a company making billions, it's not much data because the initial estimates were wrong. Like they thought that data was growing exponentially, but like stacking over time. But in practice, it's not true because many companies don't have that much. So this is why, as you said, it was hyped up and there is almost no relationship to SEO unless you deal with super mega big clients. Because even with big clients, it's not big data because it requires, this consistency over time and some volume. Volume means, how can I say, size, bulk, okay? So usually, fortunately, which is even better, we don't deal with this stuff. We may need with larger data sets, yes, for sure, but big data is very, very rare.
So the term to do with SEO is just nonsense then?
Mostly, yes, because it's used improperly. If you work with larger data sets, it's likely, like I usually do, it's normal. But you can still process them on your computer or with simple cloud plans. So this is what I mean. Usually in SEO, many websites we work with are not that big. Like example, affiliate websites are not big by default.
Right.
Compared to a publisher, because a publisher has to chart 50 articles every single day. Compared to an affiliate website where you want less. Ideally, you want to have less.
Yeah.
So in those cases, the affiliate website can also earn more than a publisher, but they will have much, much less.
A lot of business leaders, right? They may have the idea that large sets of data is what is required in order for them to quote unquote make a decision. And the other side of this thinking is that data kills creativity, and it sort of like hinders one's ability to think, essentially use their own sense and make a decision. So I'm thinking of people who use the term gut feeling. So my gut feeling is telling me this is it. In order for one to have a gut feeling about something, they need to know the business, the industry. So I wouldn't be able to have a gut feeling about what the maritime industry is going to do in the next, let's say, 12 months. But within SEO, I'll have a gut feeling, right? Because this is my my industry, right? So
expertise.
Yeah, so it takes big or large data takes away from the creativity. Are you of the same opinion, or do you think it's just being used, data is just being used incorrectly?
The second. I will tell you why. So essentially, when you have to make an important decision, okay, in general, if it is urgent or fast, this is something you also study in decision theory. It's not related to SEO alone. If you are a surgeon and you have to, to do your operation, right? Would you use data? Of course not. If you are there and you have 2 minutes to save a person, you wouldn't care. You would use your gut feelings, right? It's normal. It's correct. Because otherwise the patient would die. But if it is a long-term decision, something where there is a lot of uncertainty, then you would never rely on your gut, trust me. So that's the That's the problem of the reasoning you mentioned. That for urgent stuff where you don't have data, okay, where you don't have anything, if you have a blank state, you have to think like that. If you have uncertainty, you don't know what to do, okay? You don't know what to do. In practice, how can you improve your odds of making the right choice if you have no data? You simply trust your past experience, right? As a human. That's how we work.
Yeah.
But I give you another case. Let's say you have a content website. You already have past data. And you are asking yourself, what is the ROI of this topic? And you have all the calculations, how much you have spent on content, the profit, and whatever. You have everything, okay? Mm-hmm. I ask you, would you rather your gut feelings or use your data? You would use your data.
Yeah.
Because, it's something long-term, and you want to reduce your uncertainty. And you can do it in this case. It's feasible. So the point is that, I know it's strange to say, but you don't always have to use data. It depends on your situation. It's called uncertainty. So usually it's a trade-off. The goal is reducing your uncertainty. Anything that can reduce it and help you make the right decision is the right path. In some cases, this decision is easy. Because if you have nothing to do, if I tell you, flip a coin, if you flip heads, you live. If you flip tails, you die. There is no way of knowing what is the right one. It's luck-based.
Yeah.
How do you decide? But in SEO, for most stuff we do, usually it's not urgent. It's not life or death situations or something where you don't have data. Usually you have them. So you don't need a lot of data. You need the right amount. Like in some industries, like healthcare, they work with small data sets, very small data sets in clinical trials, which is completely different from what we do, biostatistics. In SEO, we work with, I would say, with medium, average data sets. But I told you, if you have 20 pages on your website and you need to make a decision, you don't need much data. Even if you have 500 is not much. You don't need much data to understand what to do.
Okay, so one of the issues with data, right, is the event or the situation has to already have occurred, right? So let's take traffic. You have to have had historical data, let's say a year's worth of data. All of that has to have occurred in order to use it and make a decision. How is data used, or can data be used before you have that historical record in place?
Okay, so this question is actually, a lot of interesting and smart questions today. I was saying, if you don't have anything, like if you have to launch an initiative, so you don't have anything, the only way is to use third-party data. And you can ask which? Okay, SEMrush, Ahrefs, all this data, similar web, whatever. Mm-hmm. And even though they are inaccurate, you can use them directionally to get an idea. But, again, this doesn't replace the data you will get later. So a good strategy that many do, and they do as well, is writing some stuff or do PPC to fish for keywords, to fish for ideas, to validate ideas, and then do something else. If you already have data, and you can also make predictions based on data, that would be machine learning, or predictive analytics if you want the cool name, but the idea is prediction, which is based on the idea of correlation. Okay? So predicting or trying to estimate what could happen in the future. Okay? This is not really analytics, in my opinion, because it's an enlarged definition. It would be machine learning. But even so, this type of forecasting, how you want to call it, requires you have past data. And I would never do it on SEMrush, Ahrefs data because the quality is bad, because those data are not supposed to be used for models. They are simply used to hide your decisions or to do research. So they're not supposed to be super accurate.
Right. With using either first or third party data set, SEOs have this fear that they will be held, their feet will be held to the fire if, let's say, they use it to make projections and they do not hit their target, right? What would you say to businesses who hold SEO to account with projections that are not necessarily met?
True. So,
or true, yes.
Yeah. So I would say that forecasting or estimation is something I like, not for SEO. I will tell you why. And this answers your question. Because in SEO, most of the data you have is bound, but what you do is bound by external events that in other industries are not common. For example, COVID-19 in the travel industry is a black swan, it's an uncommon, it's not common. You don't have a pandemic every 10 years, it's not common. So how can you predict it? You can't predict it, right? It can happen. In SEO, every month, you have an update that in some niches is catastrophic. So your estimates will always be off and off. But what I would suggest businesses and recommend is to predict or forecast or estimate, as I do, what you can actually measure and touch. I will tell you what. If you create content, we all agree that you have to pay your employees. So you can assign a cost to an hour. And you can say, look, to produce this much, I have to pay $50 or $100 per hour, whatever. You can assign it a value and you actually pay it. You can touch it. You feel it, right? This is what you can use to do estimates or to convince people. Using revenue, financial data. Because in SEO, you can make organic projections as long as there are no strange updates. Because when you make a prediction, the assumption is given that there are no external factors, like a random Google update. And now Google makes one every 2 months or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that for a business, it's more productive to start doing for estimation of financial cost or content. It's easier to do, easier to prove, because it's, if you paid 1,000, they can show you paid them. It's easy. And it's also easier to make forecasts, in my opinion, compared to SEO, like how many clicks you will get. For sure, you can make estimates. But again, I told you, you need one update to destroy your model. You just need one update, not two, only one. And it often happened. You have websites growing. One update about quality or whatever, or about links, simply about links. And you can, stagnate or lose. Or maybe you lose all your traffic for 6 months, then it gets back. But for 6 months, you are totally off.
Yeah. So, look, let's delve into the example with the content, right? That to me brings up a new set of problems, which is to do with attribution. So if you're creating content, it's not just SEOs who are creating it. You have copywriters, you have designers, you have different teams, right? So how would you then attribute the success of that to the different teams or people involved?
I'm not a super expert in attribution, so this is kind of my weak point. But in general, when you work on these projects, some articles or some stuff is supposed to be explicitly for SEO. Because if I have an article and I want to write a social media post, you don't publish the link, you have to repurpose it under a different form. So in my opinion, in this case, attribution, if it is for traffic, it's easy. The problem is when you have to attribute revenue, as you said, or something like that, then it's a little bit harder. And I think it depends on the organization and the structure. It's a little bit harder to tell without context. And I'm not even an expert into advanced models of attribution. But in general, for what I do, there usually isn't any problem because I told you, it's for the websites I work with, usually it's easy to tell what happened.
Right.
usually it's easy to attribute. But in other cases, if you have a more complex structure, or if you have an omni-channel strategy, I agree, it's complex. And usually you have to really understand the business to pick the right attribution model.
Okay. Tell me about SEO statistics.
Testing?
SEO statistics.
Okay. So I started my personal website like 2 months ago. I don't even recall, 2 months ago, yes. Because I wanted one, and I didn't want to put my personal name because my name is very common in Italy. So it doesn't make any sense to use it.
All right.
I asked some of my friends, and they were like, "No, man, don't put your name; it's cringe." And I was like, "Okay." So I had to invent something original. I was thinking about SEOlytics, but someone stole it. So I was like, "Oh no!" And I wanted a .com domain.
Right.
So by desperation, I just took the first thing that came close, which was statistics. So I was like, "Okay, let's pick it." And I just bought the domain, and I plan on using it to, publish more articles, but not for organic traffic. It's mostly for, social media, community building, because it's topics without demand. So there is nothing to pull. I have to push. It's mostly push, and then I can pull. That's my plan. Those are my plans with it. I really love the logo and the idea also because I paid for it, for the logo, I mean. And yeah, I think it's an original idea because no one talks about analytics that much. The only one I know is Elias Dabbas, from who I learned a lot. And also some of my friends that I can mention, like Simone De Palma or Abdullah Rahman Hannedy. Some of my friends that also do it, but for different niches or use cases.
It's a fantastic project. It's something that caught my eye. Even the name alone, SEO statistics. It sounds great when you say it. It rolls off the tongue very, very well. I'll be sure to link it in the description so people can check it out.
Sure.
You mentioned something interesting around what was it now? It was traffic, demand and pull. So you mentioned there is no demand for it. So you're mainly pushing the demand essentially.
Yeah.
And that is an area that I think is going to be very prominent within SEO and specifically keywords in the coming years. I would say 1 to 3 years. So already we have keywords which are not necessarily the data set around keywords, the demand around keywords is very much dwindling. And when you consider that with what's to come, as in generative AI in search, there is a suspicion that keyword level data will most likely be rendered useless. Over the years, have you seen keywords be less useful from a demand point of view?
So, okay, in general, we have to consider 2 factors to answer this question. One of it is the future. The other one is the present. Now, this is kind of controversial because I know a lot of people that do basic stuff that are millionaire, and you start wondering about your life and you're like, how is that possible? Like, how is that possible? So, as you said, technically, Google doesn't, of course, keywords are important, but the focus of these models is on topics because it's faster and easier. Rather than relying on terms, keywords, it's less reliable. But for websites, I have to know the keyword or the queries a page is ranking for or what you're Googling. So I think that those will be always important. In terms of optimization, so SEO work, now you have keyword clustering, which is not a breakthrough. It's a stupid, if you look the algorithms, it's a stupid idea actually. But it's extremely powerful. It's probably one of the most powerful things in SEO because it's practical and useful. So it's extremely powerful. But the thing is that even so, you should have both focuses. I think you should have a focus on the modern, on topics, but sometimes you should always be more grounded, because there are SERPs where there are exceptions. So I do believe that, even keyword density, which is, bullshit, we can say, there is a degree of truth. There is a degree of truth, because in practice, you need to have a certain frequency of a keyword on your page somehow. The thing that many people confuse is that cause effect. Having a certain density doesn't mean you will rank better. Maybe just a coincidence, or maybe you just happen to mention something related in the right position. This is what I mean. But even so, it's important to monitor this stuff to understand if there is some meaningful correlation with some other factor you don't know. So I think that keyword will always matter, because people will have to type something in the search bar. So that's data. Mm-hmm. And also, not for smashing keywords into a page, I don't do it anymore, but to understand what concepts you should smash instead, you should put into a page. For instance, if you have an article about the best romance movies of all time, which is a very competitive article if you want to rank for it. No?
Yeah.
You may notice that people with the keyword data look for other stuff, and that article is not relevant because it's supporting pages. Like romance movies where the lead is female, or where the lead, I don't know, is a doctor, something like that, something very niche. Mm-hmm. How you discover people are looking for the stuff? Keyword data. So that's why we need them.
Generative AI in search. Have you seen Google's example of it? So it, of course, pushes organic results down. And this is going to most likely change CTR in a very noticeable way. What are your thoughts around generative AI in search?
I'm not a big fan of it, in all honesty, because I always ask myself, we're talking about AI, but what's the benefit for people? Like, not for corporations or people or greedy people making money. What's the benefit for the end user? In some cases, it's better for definitions, because definitions are cheap content. You don't build a brand out of definitions. It's cold, no? There is no room for personalization. So for that stuff, it's fine. Or if I want something like that. But for other keywords, researches, I don't like it. They look like auto-scraped snippets. I don't even know if it is generative AI because they look similar. So I'm not sure, because how can we prove it? For instance, if you have an affiliate website, or if you have to have a decision, I don't care if you tell me about the best alternatives. I will have to do in-depth research anyway. So what's the point? Like, what is even the point of telling me this is the best phone? I will still do my research, and I don't trust Google telling me in 2 lines that the iPhone whatever is good. I still have to look at the specs, look something else, do more researches, or open some pages. So I'm not very positive on generative AI. First, for the click-through rate, because it's already bad in the US compared to other places. I would say it's terrible. Terrible. Even if I rank first, what's the point? I rank first, I get 5%, 10%. Then why rank first? Like, really? And sometimes, even for B2B or some niches, it's so crowded of features, videos, local maps, whatever, a knowledge panel, that even if you rank first, you are bad. Like, then what's the point? So this is my main critique. I don't want they overflood the SERPs with information. They crowd them, because in practice, the user maybe wants something easier.
So this leads to what I believe a lot of business leaders will be asking from SEOs, which is, where is the traffic data where is the traffic then going to come from? So if SEO traffic for, let's say, 75% of the keywords is going to all of a sudden vanish because of generative AI, how is SEO going to make up that amount of traffic? Because if we don't, it could lead to budgets being taken away, given to PPC, for example. You notice generative AI has PPC very much, paid very much prominent on the page, right? So you have that issue.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, again, this question is very, very smart and interesting because, it's what's happening already. I would say, in my opinion, I see SEO as strategy. What I mean is that when you have to manage an asset, a website, you need a manager or someone that is able to, handle it. What to create, what to do, no? And all of this takes a person that knows the craft. So even though the CTR declines, even though something happens, you need I don't want to say webmaster because webmaster is associated with technical stuff.
Yeah.
You need a kind of web manager, someone that is able to manage your website in terms of strategy and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it will die or it will be a problem for budget if you are kind of holistic, omni-channel, or if you consider the website as an asset and you as the head, as the manager. Because even though CTR declines, you need a strategy. How you can do it without it? Okay, you still need to publish content, you still need a strategy, you still need to manage it, you still need to manage the writers, and so on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, you can have a content manager, but it doesn't mean that you can shift or pivot into that role in general. So I don't think it's a problem. And even though SEO fails, I can still be an analyst. What's the problem? I mean, even in case.
Yeah, it's the generative AI. I'm following it very closely as the months go by because I do think it's going to be the biggest shift in search that we've ever seen. But I am anticipating the shift to expand SEO, not contract it. And I think with that expansion, it's going to make SEO a lot more elaborate. And I, for one, I'm looking forward to it. But certain things I do find as not useful for searchers. It's more for Google. So, for example, Google showing generated text without sources. That is a big issue.
Yes,
in my opinion. So I think hopefully that's something that they fix or resolve before it's pushed live. Now, if I were to ask you, what is the wrong way to use data? What would you say?
Ooh, we can write a book about that. So, so I can tell you what I read on LinkedIn, because it's usually the place with the most misinformation. So I can tell you what I read based on real life examples. The first one is to use them for decision making in the wrong way. What I mean? When you do analytics, when you do descriptive, when you describe data, and you judge the past, as we were telling before, you still don't know anything about the future, or it's not enough to prove cause effect. Okay? So this point is clear. Mm-hmm. Many people do that anyway. And this is very wrong. I notice a lot of people saying, put in the picture of an Excel spreadsheet with a column in green and saying, this is the evidence that doing this improves traffic. No. You can't. It's like asking a researcher, can you prove, I don't know, that this cures cancer? Oh, yeah, for sure. One patient out of 1,000 was fine. It's the same idea. So this is the most common problem, confusing analytics, descriptive with statistics. If you have to make important decisions, you want statistics. And this is not what I think. It's quoted from Cassie Kozikov, which is like one of the experts working for Google, not Google search. Google, it's like chief decision scientist. So totally different field from the from the people we know. And of course, I agree with her because I studied from her material, but also because they are different fields. So people confuse this. Think that something can be used for decision making, important decisions, when it cannot be used. The same is also true when I notice people confusing metrics, like using vanity metrics. And this is a big problem in digital marketing because tools like Google Analytics don't give you good metrics. They only give you, at first, if you open the tool, what do you see? Users, page views, sessions, event counts. Now you have event counts or time on page. These metrics are good if you combine them with something else. But alone, it's vanity. If you tell your manager, we got this much. Okay, and now? Okay, and now? This is the problem. That vanity metrics, they can be good in some cases, but they can be bad for decision making or for other stuff. A lot of marketing dashboards are barely usable. I know a lot of them, a lot of Looker Studio dashboard. But in reality, we have to be honest with ourselves. If you talk to an executive or to a manager, and you have a dashboard with 5 pages, if you are lucky, they will look at the first plot, if you are very lucky that day. Which is true. They don't have the time, or they don't want. I agree. So our job is kind of to make it easier, to make it simple. And many people make it more complex. Like a lot of dashboards are good looking. They are cool. I would never be able to do them because I don't have that, skill, at least now. But are they practical? No, they're not practical. How would you use them for decision making? This is another point. Confusing cool with useful. Most good stuff is boring. Unfortunately, most good stuff is boring.
Yeah.
And very you can even automate it. The last error, I would say, is making, using data in such a way that you are shoehorning a decision. Sometimes data don't make sense. Sometimes there is no sense. If I recall, this is called pareidolia, where you try to find a pattern when there is nothing. It's a bug in our brain, used many, many, many years ago with predators, right? Like when you look at the clouds, you see a shape, but clouds don't look like rhinos or like crocodiles, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with this data. Sometimes there is no pattern. Sometimes there is nothing. But your brain or your bias wants to confirm some ideas that you already believe in. In SEO, this is true if you look at traffic data, right? Or with a cluster. You say, this cluster is getting more traffic because I work on it. Maybe it's not true. In other industries or fields, you see that every day in politics. It's true. They try to confirm what they do and manipulate their results. This is very common in reality. You saw that. I mean, it happens every day. In SEO, it's mostly with traffic. Like you can say, this article performed better because for this reason, because I work on it. Probably, could be, but sometimes it can also be a coincidence. Or maybe you have more topical authority for that topic, and so it ranks better.
Yeah. As you were saying that the phrase lies and statistics, or is it statistics and lies came to mind.
Yeah.
What is the one thing you wish every SEO professional knew about data?
I would say analytical mindset or acumen. One of the two. It's not coding, because coding is a means, and analysts are not really good at, and they're not developers, different jobs or engineers. But I would recommend analytical mindset or this ability to ask the right questions and to be more cynical. Not too much, a little bit more skeptic, because when I read a lot of stuff online, I don't buy it. I usually ask myself, but is it true? Is it realistic? And often it's not. This is kind of analytical mindset, because you have to start doubting about stuff. That's how you work with data. Because if you don't doubt, if you trust anything you read or anything you see, I don't think you are tailored, you are good to work with data, but even in SEO. For example, I will pick the example of Google. Google claims a lot of stuff, but in practice, it's false. It depends on the niche, on the SERP. Mm-hmm. Maybe sometimes it's luck. As I told you, maybe sometimes it's a coincidence. But if you don't test, if you're not skeptic, how do you know? Like, how do you know that something doesn't work just because they told you? This is not scientific evidence, right? It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's not a proof.
Marco, you have a fascinating way of thinking about SEO with data.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you online?
Twitter, mostly. And my handle is, okay, maybe it's a little bit hard to say in English, but it will be Jord, which will be G-I, Jord, Marco, like my name, and then 96. So 96, LinkedIn with my full name, or my website, SEOtistics.com. And that's pretty much it, yeah. I also have a newsletter,
Yeah, go ahead.
Which is called, usually my newsletter, it doesn't really have a name because it's the one for SEOtistics, right?
Right.
It would be the newsletter. I don't recall if I give it a name the first. Yeah, I don't recall if I called it Analytics for SEO or something like that. Because usually when I send the email, it says SEOtistics. That's why I say.
I'll have the links in the description so people can go ahead and get in contact with you. Thank you so much, Marco. Have a brilliant day, and we'll catch up again another time.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you, Austine.
Cheers. Bye now.